Well, good morning. So either I just have this weird enjoyment of tools, or bold faith must be a lot of work. So we've gone from shovels to axes to you name it in this series, and today we are going to be looking at this story about a floating axe head. Some of you may not even know that such a story exists in the Bible, but it does. So you got your Bibles, look at 2 Kings with me. 2 Kings, chapter number 6. Excited about bold comeback today. Is anybody in the building that could just use a good comeback in some area of your life? Maybe you're going to be revealed some of those areas even today as we dig into this series. If you don't know me, my name's Kevin, pastor here, and if you're a guest with us, I want to tell you that we're so glad you're here. Just sit back, know that you're among family, that you're among friends. We like to have fun at this place. I believe that the church should be the most fun, exciting, energetic place in all of the world because we have the hope of the world, and his name is Jesus. And so you're among friends celebrating that very thing. And our family is an extended family. That family has extended to Florida and to beaches all around the world. And so if you are watching us online today from the beach or from your house in your pajamas, whatever that looks like for you online on television, thank you for joining us as well. But I'm pumped about what God is going to do in your life and in mine today. It's time to get to work. Anybody ready to get to work? I bet you won't go to sleep today, will you? 2 Kings chapter 6 is going to give us our fifth story about this man called Elisha. We've been looking at the life and the journey of Elisha, and Elisha really shows us what it looks like to have bold faith even during uncertain times. And you know, really, when you look around your life and mine, it mirrors us, doesn't it? Quite a bit. To this idea that we're called to have bold faith, but we have to exercise that faith when it's not very convenient and when things around us are uncertain. And so today, as we look at bold comeback in this story, here's the premise of what our series has really been about so far. We've been looking at the fact that a lot of times we'll ask God to do bold miracles through our faith, yet refuse to put ourselves at times in a position to need those miracles. We ask God, do these amazing, miraculous things in my life and through my faith, God. But in the journey, don't ask me to do anything that would be uncomfortable or that would stretch me. Or maybe we say, God, stretch me, do bold things, bold miracles through my faith. And God says, okay, we'll take this step. But we say, and we hold back. And we hold back. And what we're looking at in this series is principles from the life of Elisha that'll help us take that step. Not hang over the ledge anymore, but actually take the leap of faith that God has been asking us to take. For some of you, it's to stay put, it's to stick it out, it's to not quit and not give up on these things that maybe you've been tempted to give up on. For some of you, it is a big step of faith. For some of you, it's stepping up with giving of your finances or of your time or of yourself to somebody else. For some of you, and I've been hearing story after story about how God's been stretching and doing new things. But one thing is in common, it requires a lot of work. Can I get an amen? If you're going to have bold faith, it doesn't just show up on your doorstep and go, I'm here to make you faithful today. But then again, does it? I think we have that through Jesus. A lot of times, though, he just says, pick up the tool and let's get to work. We've been asking the question in this series, how can I then position myself for God to do bold miracles through my faith? Look at 2 Kings with me, chapter number 6, and we're going to look at a story about a floating axe head. We're going to look at this story about Elisha, and he is really training other prophets at this point. You know, he was the young prophet in training, if you will, under Elijah. So everybody say Elijah. But we're talking about Elisha, so say Elisha. That's who we're looking at. Now Elisha is the prophet in Israel. He's the man. He's the one that they're coming to for training. And so he is literally training a group of what we would look at as like seminary students at this season of his career and of his calling as a prophet of God. And so that's where we pick up our story today. But here's the thing that's going to help you. Here's the thing that I believe is going to connect all of us, not just the fact that we're here and we're not on a beach somewhere, but also this fact that in this story, there's a big need that's once again represented. Have you noticed that theme throughout Elisha's life? Those of you who've been tracking with us on this series, the theme really is that it's the emptiness that we bring to the table that God really uses the most to do the biggest things, the most bold, miraculous, faith-driven miracles in our life. We've said over and over that my emptiness is just evidence. And I want to remind you of that. Somebody needs to hear that today. Your emptiness, the things that you don't bring to the table, the needs that are so present in your life, that emptiness is just evidence of your readiness for God to do something bold and big. Let's look at 2 Kings chapter 6. We'll read the first 5 verses of this story. It's one of the oddest miracles in all of the Bible. But I think there's something here for us to take away today. Let's look at the Word. I'll be reading from the English Standard Version, so if you want to get your apps or iPads or whatever that looks like, you can get that out, ESV version. And then those Bibles in your seats are the same version. If you don't have a Bible, I want to encourage you, take that one home as our gift to you. You can take that and use it. Who's ready for the Word this morning? That was weak. Let's do it again. Who's ready for the Word this morning? There it is. Verse number 1, 2 Kings chapter 6. Love this story. So excited to teach it to you today. Now it says, the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, these are those seminary students in training, see, the place where we dwell under your charge is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan. There's that Jordan River again, if you were here last week. Let us go to the Jordan, and each of us get there a log, and let us make a place for us to dwell there. So this group has been growing. They're training. They're following after God, but they've grown. It's a beautiful thing. They're expanding. They're in need of that. So let's build us a place that we can continue growing and training. And it says, and he answered, go. Verse 3. One of them said, be pleased to go with your servants. Come with us, Elisha. And he said, I will go. Pretty simple story so far, but it's about to get weird. Verse 4. So he went with them, and when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was felling a log, his axe head fell into the water, and he cried out, alas, my master, it was borrowed. Pause there, and we'll get to verses 6 and 7 in a minute, but that sets up our story. A couple of things you should know is that it was a borrowed axe. You notice that. It was one that he wouldn't have been able to afford on his own as a seminary student. I've been there and done that, and I can understand how you can't afford a nice axe, and that's where this guy is. It was borrowed. So again, just like the widow's oil story, we have a debt that can't be repaid. Why was he so bothered by this? A few reasons. It was an iron. If you look later in the story, we'll see it in verses 6 and 7 when we read it. It was an iron axe head. Now, iron was pretty high cost then, during this time. Most of the tools that people would use would actually be made of bronze. And so this was a nice axe. It was a nice axe. And it was one that this seminary student, obviously he didn't own one for a reason, but he couldn't repay that debt. That's why he would say, Master, the axe head fell, and now I have a debt I cannot pay. That's the backdrop of this story, another emptiness picture for you and for me. And a lot of times we represent that. He couldn't pay the debt back, and he had lost something very valuable. Confession time. Confession is good for us sometimes, they say. How many of you constantly lose things? Go ahead. I think there's more. You're in church. I can remember times where I've lost car keys. One time I was looking for car keys in the bottom of the car, and I literally had it hanging in my mouth. Looked for sunglasses, and they were right here on top of my head before. Anybody ever done that? I found 2 really good tools that we use a lot in our house. How many of you have an iPhone? Well, there's this amazing app called Find My iPhone. Woo, buddy, have we used that app. It's an amazing feature that even if it's on silent, you can make that thing beep. And so it's in the closet or the bathroom or the car, and you just walk around and you hear ding, ding. We use it all the time. Some of you are already looking it up, aren't you? It's okay, you can do that in church. We even have a remote. How many of you lose the TV remote in your house? Yeah, our kids will carry it off somewhere. There's no telling where it goes. Well, there's a button on the receiver that makes it beep now. It's a new thing, and we love it because we lose things sometimes. And you're probably like me, and you lose things a lot of times. But here, I want to talk to those of you today, though, that you would say you've lost something a little bit more valuable in nature than an iPhone. sunglasses, car keys, or the tangible things in your life, you feel like you've lost something spiritually. Some of you feel like, I've lost my joy. I've lost my faith. I used to be so passionate about serving in the children's ministry or the youth ministry. I used to be so passionate about sharing the gospel, and I've lost that. You feel like, I lost what I once had. I used to be so passionate. I remember coming back from youth camps. I've called it the youth camp passion. You come back from youth camp and you're fired up and ready to go. You can't wait to charge hell with a squirt gun kind of faith. You're ready to go. But then the next week comes and your passion starts to sizzle down a little bit. Some of you have lost that joy. And some of you go back to a season of your life in your faith where you would say, boy, I wish I could have that back. I remember when, and you fill in that blank, but now, here's where I am. Maybe it was right after you gave your life to Jesus, right after you got baptized, and something that once was is now gone, and you've lost it. You've lost your spiritual, you ready for this? You've lost your spiritual edge, if you will. I believe, hear me, I'm excited today because I believe with all of my heart that some of you are going to get your edge back today. That some of you are going to make a bold comeback today. And I want to talk about how we can do just that because I love what the bottom line of this story, what today is all about is, and if you're taking notes, you can write this down. The bottom line of today's message is simply this, that Jesus is the king of the comeback. We serve a God who was buried in a borrowed tomb, who walked out of the grave defeating death, hell, and all of the sin of this entire world. He is the king of the comeback, and if he could walk out of and come back out of death and hell and the grave for you and for me, what makes us think that he can't help us find the stuff that we've lost? Jesus is alive today, and he is the king of the comeback. He's walked out of the grave, and you ready for this? The same power. Everybody look at me. This is going to help somebody in this place today. I believe it with all my heart. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is available to you in that area that makes you feel like you need to come back. The same. Now, you should be shouting about that. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead, you're telling me, Pastor, is mine? Yes. That's the God that we serve. Some of you could testify to the fact that you've already had a financial comeback. Anybody with me? God already helped you overcome something unovercomable. God already helped you come out of a relationship struggle. How many of you have had a relationship comeback? A marriage comeback? How many of you have had a comeback that nobody thought you could ever have? Some of you, I've heard your stories. You've had a comeback because Jesus stepped in. And for some of you, that comeback starts today. Let's look at this story, and I want you to know I read a quote this week that just screams this story to me and this idea of a bold comeback in our life, and the statement was simply that on the other side of every disappointment is a God appointment. On the other side of every disappointment is a God appointment. You've got an appointment with God to hear something that's going to change your life radically even today. I truly do believe it. I want to answer two questions today that this story begs, and when we talk about having a bold comeback and that Jesus is the king of the comeback, the first question is, how is a bold comeback possible for me? You said, man, you were in my head. No, I was just in mine. I struggle with that question just like you do. I've had those seasons where I didn't think a comeback would ever be possible for me. Some of you are in that season now. Some of you remember seasons like that in your past, and it's still holding you back. Some of you are walking into a new season where you're asking, how can I have that kind of a comeback? The second question I'll answer in a few moments is, how do I get my edge back? If I lost it, how do I get it back? Just like the axe head, floated too deep to find. How do I get it back? I want us to look at those two questions. I'll give you a couple of thoughts on each. Let's start with, how is a bold comeback possible for me? Some of you already wrote the rest of the sermon off saying, it's not. I want to give you two reasons that I would respectfully disagree with you based on the power of Jesus and his word today. Two reasons that a bold comeback is possible for you. Let's look at verses 6 and 7. I love this story. Last two verses here, we already saw that it fell, it's over, A debt cannot be repaid now, so what are we going to do? So we look at Elisha and say, hey, help. You ever had those moments? Help. Verse 6. Then the man of God, this is Elisha, he said, this is a borrowed axe. I can't pay it back. Elisha said, verse 6, where did it fall? Underline that. Where did it fall? We're going to come back there when I answer the second question. Where did it fall? And then he showed him the place, and he cut off a stick. Imagine this. He cut off a stick, threw it in the water, and made the iron float. And he said, underline this as well, take it up. Take it up. So he reached out his hand, and he took it. End of the story. Interesting. We skip it a lot of times and go, wow, that was cool. I have no idea what to do with that, but that was cool. But I think there are some very interesting metaphors that we can pull out of this story. And so let's talk about how is a bold comeback possible for me. Number one, if you're taking notes, my big God. This is probably my favorite thing about this story. My big God cares about the little details of my life. Everybody look at me for a second. God cares about even the little things that even other people in your life, they don't seem to care about. God cares about the little details of your life. I challenge you this week. Here's a challenge. Write this down. A little homework assignment in the side margins of your notes. Look for God in the little things this week. You know what I'm convinced of? That next week when you come back and we continue this Bold Faith in Uncertain Times series, you'll have a list of ways you found God even in the little details of your life. Those little things that we don't expect. And I'll give you a couple of stories about that in just a few moments about my own life. But here's what I want you to know today is that God knows how to help you find even that stuff that you didn't even mean to lose to begin with. He's aware of those things that you've lost. He's aware of how you've lost your edge. He's aware of where your joy went and how your faith doesn't look and feel the same as it used to. And He cares. God cares about your comeback. God cares about where you sit. God cares about all those things that you've lost, all those things that you're losing, and all those things that hurt you the most deeply in your life, because our big God cares about the little details in my life. Let me give you a statement that'll help you this week, because anybody ever had a setback before? Some of you are in the middle of some big setbacks right now. How many of you ever caused your own setback before? How many of you ever had a setback that you didn't cause before? Yeah, you've probably experienced both. My list of things that I cause for myself tends to do this sometimes, but a lot of times we don't even ask for it. We're going to talk about that in a minute too. But let me give you a statement. Your setback, I truly believe, your setback is just a set up for a comeback. When God gets involved, when Jesus sticks His hand in, your setback is just a set up for a comeback that only God could do in your life and your faith and your journey and your hope and your joy and your passion and your contentment and all those things that maybe you feel like you've lost. So how have you lost something? How have you lost that spiritual edge, if you will? We have an enemy, if you haven't noticed, a spiritual enemy who seeks to kill and destroy everything that God is building in terms of your bold faith. Sometimes it feels like he's winning the battle, but he's not going to win in the end. Who's read the end? Have you read the end? If you haven't read the end, you should read the end. You know what I find? He wins. And the enemy that wants to do nothing but seek you out, hunt you down, and kill and destroy the faith that God is building doesn't hold a candle to my Jesus, who's the king of a comeback, and He will do that in your life today. But it's that big God that cares about the little details of my little life. Why? I still can't answer that totally, except that He just loves me. He just loves me. Some of you may not even be able to say those words because you don't truly believe it. I pray that you leave here today knowing that you're loved, that Jesus meets you right where you are. God cares about your comeback. He cares about every need that you have in your life. And today, the second reason I believe that a comeback is possible for you, yes, you, is because my God defies gravity with His grace. My God defies gravity with His grace. Some of you today would say, my situation, the gravity of my situation is pulling me down in ways that I can't overcome. Not even Jesus could overcome the way that gravity is pulling me down because of my situation. But we serve a God whose grace defies gravity. Just like He can make iron float in a river, He can bring to life that which is dead inside of you and me. I serve a God whose grace defies gravity. That means that His grace is bigger than my situation. That means His grace is bigger than the rebellious child that you're trying to bring back to Jesus. That means His grace is bigger than all of those job problems that you're having and you're wanting to run away from it today. That means His grace is bigger than the fears that hold you back from taking the steps God's called you to take today. He's just getting started with you. His grace is sufficient for you. Some of you came in the doors today believing that His grace is not quite enough. You might not say those words, but in the depths of your heart, you truly didn't know and believe that His grace is enough for you. But you're going to leave today knowing that His grace is sufficient for everything God's doing in your life. I pray that over you today. I pray that it's a comeback moment for you today to see that His grace is sufficient. It even defies gravity. Best story I can think of in my own life about that. I was 20 years old. I was full-time in ministry, not with a paycheck, but with the time I was putting in. God had just called this young punk to ministry, and I was trying to figure out what that looked like. I was full-time in seminary, undergraduate studies in seminary, full-time in construction. I was married, and I was overwhelmed, and I was stressed out, and I was carrying a big load for a 20-year-old kid, and I didn't know what to do with that load. I prioritized the best I could, but before long, I developed something that 20-year-olds don't typically develop, and it's called shingles. And the doctors simply said, it started on my right eye, on the eyelid. That was some painful stuff, folks. And my eye swelled shut. Went to the doctor, and they said it's shingles, and they got me on medication, all that stuff. And they said, you really shouldn't be having shingles. Are you stressed out? And I was like, mm-mm. And they went, you sure? And I went, just a little. And they said, really, this is most likely stress-induced. And so for 30 days, I was literally on my back, my eye swollen shut, in writhing pain, and I had all this stuff I needed to do. I wasn't working, wasn't getting paid, the bills weren't getting paid. It was a financially stressful time. It was a ministry stressful time. I was still trying to prioritize ministry even over my family. It can happen. Your job can do that. Lots of things can do that. I was trying to do that even from my bed. For 30 days, I laid there on my back, angry. Still trying to get it done. I had everybody cross your arms like this. It'll feel good. It'll feel even better in a minute when we uncross them. Some of you spiritually, this is you right now. That's where I was. But you know what God did eventually? Drop them. He uncrossed my arms because guess what? I didn't listen. Any hard-headed people in the room? Hear it? Can I get an amen from my wife in the back? Guess what happened to me? I healed, eye opened up. Middle of the night, probably 2 a.m., laying there beside my wife, and I said, it feels bad again. She said, it sounds the same and it looks the same as it did when it all started. I said, no, it's not. Middle of the night, we were back in the emergency room. Same place, same result. My eye swelled shut. And I spent 30 more days on my back with the same thing. 60 days, there I laid. Second go around, I said, okay, God. You say, would God use something like that in your life to speak to you? Yeah. He did in my life. I go back to that. Well, God wouldn't use something so bad. Yeah, He would. I'm a walking testimony of that. He'll use even the darkest moments to teach you the things that we need to learn the most. And I laid there, and I was depressed. And then there was one, I remember the lowest moment. My father and my family's here right now. my wife and her mom and some other people with the children's ministry I was leading at the time went to this conference that I was supposed to be at, and I wasn't going to be there again. And I was depressed, and I was at probably the lowest point of my life, and it was then that I learned a few things about me that I carry around today. And I still remember my dad coming over. He brought store-to-door pizza. That was our favorite pizza place in Georgia that we would, and he brought it over, and he just sat there with me, and he came in, and I was just sobbing. I still remember it. I still remember his face. He may not even remember exactly what that looked like, but I was just sobbing like a baby. And he came in, and he didn't really know what to say like anybody else, but he just sat the pizza down on the table, sat across from me on the couch, and just cried with me, watched me cry, prayed for me, listened. And I talked about how I feel like I was on such a great trajectory in my life, and I was getting so much momentum, but I felt so low, and I didn't totally know why. And it wasn't until after that day, and he just sat there. And by the way, a little practical note for you and for me. Sometimes the best thing that you offer to a very tough and difficult situation is not this, it's this. It's just sit and be present. The best present you can bring to a tough situation is your presence, not your words. You don't always have to have the words to fix everything. That's what he did. He sat there with me. He cried with me. We prayed together. And it was following that I took away. And I really tried to boil it down this week to what did I learn from that? And here's what I learned. I think it was Bill Hybels that once said this. This was a characterization of my life. The way I was doing the work of God was destroying the work of God in me. That can happen in your life too. The way I was doing the work of God was destroying the work of God in me, the things that he was building, the things that he was showing me. I learned that I was praying publicly, but I wasn't praying privately. I was getting up in front of crowds and praying, but then I didn't go home and pray in the mornings before I started my day. I was prioritizing professionally, but I wasn't prioritizing personally. My ministry started to trump my marriage. I was a full-time pastor, but a part-time follower of Jesus. That's what I learned about myself. I started to care more about the appearance than I did the substance. And I had a mentor speak into my life during that season and said, you know, ministry is not a sprint, Kevin, it's a marathon. And I would tell you, your faith, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I tell you those stories because it was a setup for a comeback. It was after that low moment where I sat there and cried with my dad in that living room with store-to-door pizza. It was after that moment that God showed me those things that now walk with me every single day, and it serves as a reminder. It was a deep, dark, low season in my life, yes, but it's one of those seasons that changed everything. You want to see what it looked like? By the way, go ahead. I was reluctant. If you're squeamish, don't look. Just so you know, that's what it looked like. And I was looking at that picture. Okay, you can take it down. I was looking at that picture this week, and it just serves as a reminder of a low moment in my life when God did some amazing things and taught me things that characterize who I am every single day. And I truly believe that in this moment today where you feel like you've lost something significant, when you feel like you're in a low spot, that God's grace is going to defy gravity in your situation. It's going to flip it upside down and set you up for a comeback. Because if it weren't for that season of my life, I wouldn't be who I am today. God used those pieces of my life that I hated to do the things that I needed, and to teach me and set me up for the long haul of faith that he has called me to lead through. And I learned this statement that I want to share with you, that God often works the most when we find him the least. God often works the most when we seem to find him the least. Some of you feel like you've been searching, and you know in Scripture it says, seek me and you'll find me, and you don't believe that because you seem to find God the least. I would tell you that God's just using that setback as a set up for a comeback that he's going to bring about in your life, because he's working in the silence, he's working in the background, and he's just getting started. He's not done with you. He's still the same God that he was when he saved you. And if you don't know him today, he's the same God today when he does save you, and I believe that's going to happen for somebody today, that he will be 100 years from now. He's the king of the comeback, and his grace defies gravity. How do I get my edge back? All he did, by the way, was throw a stick in. We serve the God who can use a stick to make iron float. What makes you think he's not bigger than your circumstance? What makes you think he can't help you get your edge back? How can I get my edge back? Two things I see from this story I want to share with you. Number one, revisit where you lost it. Verse number 6, it said, where did it fall? Elisha said, where did it fall? Where did it fall? Some of you do need to go back and think about at what point in my life, where did I drop that passion? Where did I lose the joy that once characterized who I was? And revisit the site of the crime. Revisit the site where that edge went missing. It can be painful and emotional, but I think it's significant in this story. He said, where did it fall? Go back. Show me where it falled. Where did the loss happen? Where did we get off track? A lot of times to get back on track, you got to revisit the places where you got off track to begin with. And for some of you, that may mean that you've got to go back and see a counselor and work through some loss or some grief or some trauma that has happened in your life and actually revisit and work through that. Some of you, it may mean that you need to take a step that you've been holding back from. It may mean that you need to stick something out and not quit. I don't know what it means for you, but I know today that as you go back there and revisit it, God's going to show you some new things about it. I truly do believe it. Does that mean we live in the past? Mm-mm. That's the whole point of this story. You'll see, he doesn't just say, where did it fall? The end. Stay there. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. I love that he says, even though I walk through the valley. Doesn't mean I pitch a tent there, but I do have to walk through it. I do have to keep going. And so the same thing can happen with us. Proverbs 24 and verse 16 says, though a righteous man falls 7 times, he rises again. It's time to rise again and walk through that valley that's been holding you back. It's time to pick that tent up, throw it in the fire, and keep going. But here's what I know. Number 2, how do I get my edge back? Go back, yes. But number 2, take it back. Write that down if you're taking notes. Circle that. Take it back. Take it back. Pick it up. Some of you have been really good at revisiting the scene of your edge loss, but you've refused to pick up the floating iron that God has put in the water right in front of you. God has given you a way out. God has given you the power to take forward steps, but you still go back and look at where you lost something so much that you're not even seeing that iron, an axe head, is floating in the water beside you. I love that Elisha looks and says, where did it fall? He throws the stick in, it floats, and he says, take it up. Take it up. Sometimes God's doing something so big in our life, but we miss what he's doing, and all we have to do is just bend down and pick up that which God has made float. That which God raised to life is in front of you, and it's in your grasp. God's grace that defies gravity has put it in your grasp. It's time to take it up and move forward today. I love that God is the only one who could have made the axe head float. All that student had to do was just pick it up. That's the same power that raised Jesus from the dead that you have available in your life today. It's time to take hold of that power today. And when we look at this story, I want to walk through a few of these stories and just mention a few things. Think about the stories of Elisha's life. If you haven't heard the rest of this series, go back and listen to these stories because they all have a theme. I go back to the beginning. It's only God that can give a call, as he did with Elisha, but he wants you to burn the plow. Only God can send the water, but he wants you to dig a ditch, even when it doesn't make sense, with bold trust. Only God can multiply the oil, as he did with the widow, but he wants you to go gather the empty jars. Only God can heal leprosy, Naaman from last Sunday, but he wants you to go take a dip in the river. Only God can make the axe head float, but he wants you to lift it out. He wants you to take hold of the power that's at your fingertips because of his grace that can defy gravity. It's kind of like prayer. We all have the constant opportunity of prayer, but we need to hit our knees. Just because I don't pray doesn't mean that I can't pray. We have it at our fingertips, but we've got to hit our knees. Just because I don't choose to plug into God's power doesn't mean it's not there. The same thing is happening in your life today. And so what do we do with this? Last statement I'll give you today is simply this: do what you can do and trust God to do what you cannot do. Do what you can do. Do what you can do. Take the axe head up. Go gather the empty jars of oil Spend time on your knees in prayer, praying for that relationship that seems to be dying. Do what you can do, but then leave it at the foot of the cross and trust Him to do the things that you cannot do, like raise an axe head up from the Jordan River and make it float. Do what you can do, and then trust Him with all those things that you can't. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, it talks about kind of coming back to God. That was a theme in the nation of Israel. They'd get away and they'd come back, and they'd get away and they'd come back. Does that sound like your life? Up and down and up and down, get away, come back. The end of these verses, Deuteronomy 30, second and third verses, it just simply says, God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you. God will restore your fortunes. They didn't go anywhere. Here's an interesting thought. A lot of times we get so discouraged by the fact that we can't find the axe head in our life. But there's power in realizing it never went anywhere. It's right back where we left it. A lot of times with God's power, that's what we do. God wants to restore or bring a comeback in your life, but every time that He has done that in my life, you know what I've noticed? Every single time, His power, His presence, His person, who He was always in the same place. It was just me that got off track. It was just me that lost focus. He's always the same. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He'll never change. He'll never forsake you. And for some of you today, you need to realize that Jesus is the King of the comeback. And take hold of the floating axe head in your life and follow Him and trust Him like never before. Close your eyes with me for just a moment. I just want to ask you to reflect on that thought. Even in the story about Naaman last week, where he went and dipped in the Jordan River and God healed his leprosy. I was looking at that even some more this week, and that word, his skin was restored, it said, even means to be made better than new. To be made better than new. Our God specializes in making things better than new in your life today. For some of you that know Him today, you've had something and then you've lost it. It's time to take hold of that which you've lost. And you know what that means. You know what step of faith that looks like for you. And I challenge you to pray and lay it at the foot of the cross. But I want to speak particularly in this moment to those of you who would say, I never really have found Jesus. My sin has dropped my eternity into the bottom of the Jordan River. My sin has put eternal life and grace out of my reach. And I would tell you, if you don't know Jesus, you're exactly right. It's a hopeless situation that we find ourselves in when we don't have Jesus. Oh, but the same God who raised Him from the dead did something for you, because Jesus is the King of the comeback, and your greatest comeback comes from that moment when you just simply say, Jesus, I do need you. My comeback begins where I end. My salvation begins where I end. I've been trying to save myself and be good enough, but today I realize I'll never be good enough. And so, Jesus, today I give you me, not just some of me, but all of me. You say, why would I do that? Because that is salvation. So many times we make complicated that which God made so simple. Today, if you would say, I don't know that I could spend eternity in heaven with God because of my relationship with Jesus, your salvation begins today if you end today, where you say, Jesus, I'm yours. It's no longer about me. My life is now yours. I lay it at your feet. Defy the gravity of my sin with your grace, Jesus. And you know what? Some of your hearts are screaming that in this place today. You not only believe, but it's time to trust. Stop trusting in yourself to save you and start trusting in Him to save you. I'm not going to lead you in a prayer because you know why? A prayer doesn't save you. A prayer doesn't save you. A prayer is just our means by which we talk to Jesus. I'm not going to lead you in a prayer because I believe your heart is screaming it from your own words, and the salvation comes back to the condition of that very same heart that's screaming to Jesus now. Some of you need to take that step and cry out to Him and ask Him to save you. And the Bible promises, and what I love is that it's not just the Bible that promises it. The Bible is the Word of God. It's God who looks into the depths of your heart, the depths of your soul, and promises you that you shall be saved if you believe on Jesus Christ. It really is that simple. Nobody looking around. Would you take that step across this building if you would say, that's me. I need to do that in this place?